We're recording.
Okay, we are recording, so a little bit clunky at the start because I'm not used to working with Teams. That's entirely my fault. Today with Laura, who will introduce herself in a moment, and I will stop talking very shortly, which is what everyone looks forward to. We're going to talk about radical candour. We call it candour with a U. The Americans call it candour, which might cause a bit of interest later. I'm going to stop talking now. Laura, what does it mean to you, and who are you, first of all?
Hello, I'm Laura Matthews. I run an HR consultancy business called Epoch Rebel, and radical candour is a phrase or a methodology that was coined by a lady called Kim Scott in America. She ran a software company, and she wanted a way of giving feedback to people, being honest with people, but coming at it from a place of caring. And I think I love the phrase that she coined, which is say what you mean without being mean. And that is basically the essence of radical candour. It's a way of being able to tell somebody what they need to hear in order to help them to develop, but in a way that is kind, and it is coming from a place of caring and empathy.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. And I realise I've liked it, and to a degree I've practiced it without knowing what it was or what it then became, if that makes sense. It kind of fits my why can't you take what I really need to say to you without intending to cause you harm type position. Because what you said, say what you mean without being mean. It's great. Everyone would say, yeah, I get that. But we have to unpick it because that's not easy. It's very difficult. And it doesn't happen very often. And it's not feedback we're talking about. It's something deeper and more meaningful. It is a kind of feedback, but it's different too. And we've got a model we'll look at a bit later. You don't have to just look at us yakking at each other. We'll throw some stuff up here, which is really powerful. But let's start to unpick it a bit, Laura. Why is it difficult?
I think it's difficult because some managers, not all managers, can really struggle to tell people what they think for fear of hurting somebody's feelings. And especially, I would suggest in sort of UK-based cultures where we are all quite polite to each other, unless we're not. So there's kind of no middle ground, and I see this very much as a middle ground. So managers who avoid having to have these conversations because they feel it's going to cause conflict are too nice. And so the individual never learns. They never learn that they're actually, not that what they did wasn't cool or what they did wasn't right. And so that management technique isn't very good. And on the other hand, you'll have those managers that are like really brutally honest to the point of offensiveness. They have no filter and they will just say what they think. And so radical candour to me is kind of a really nice middle ground, because I think people can hear not so good and also good, because this applies to good positive feedback and reinforcement of great behaviours in a way if they feel that it's coming from a good place, if it's coming from a place where the person giving them that the nudge in the right direction cares about them.
Well, I think so, and I think I build around a couple of things you said there. We're already talking about managers, but it doesn't have to be just managers. It could be any conversation with anyone in any context. It's not purely a managerial tool. And I'd also say I agree with you about the cultural aspect. And I was talking with a client in China yesterday from here in Cheltenham, which helps. And this was the conversation I was having. If I looked at my notes there, I'd see words like, I want to say what I think without causing upset. People don't always hear what I say because I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. And the inability to use radical candour in a caring but direct way, the inability to do that impacts on relationships negatively.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned at the top of this show that you think you've been doing it. You think you've been doing it for a long time, and actually I think I have. In my role as an HR professional, we get involved in having to have really, really difficult, quite emotional conversations with people.
Sure.
If you're in a disciplinary scenario, for example, and you're supporting your manager, but the manager will struggle to have those conversations. And so I find by talking from the heart and showing the person that you care and acknowledging to them that this is a really uncomfortable position for them to be in,
Mhm.
shows that you're showing some empathy with them. And I think the messages that you need to get over will land much, much better. And so I think I've been doing it like this for a very long time, because I will say what needs to be said.
Mm. And irrespective of how wonderful and insightful we both are, I think that's true for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I've just made a list here of all the connections, and you just beat me to empathy. I just listed conflict, emotional intelligence, feedback, self-esteem, negotiation, empathy. It fits into all of those headings.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And I think how I discovered radical candor was through reading Patty McCord's book, Powerful. If you haven't read this book, I'm giving it a plug. I'm not being paid for it. I'm giving it a plug just because it's the story of Netflix, and it's building a culture of freedom and responsibility. And in order to build a really strong culture of freedom and responsibility, you have to have radical candor. People need to feel safe to be able to say what they're feeling as well. And picking up on your point earlier on, Andrew, around it's not just a manager team member conversation. It would be co-workers talking to each other in a way that is respectful but honest.
Respectful and honest. Yeah, we'll have to put up a definition and the quadrant in a minute or two, because it really is handy. And I'm glad you started to plug Patty McCord. I came at this through a client in Ohio, and it's what they've been using for a while, and they came at it through Kim Scott. So I think you're right. I really like Patty McCord. I've got some great videos of her. She's very honest. She's very brutal about things like jargon. Why do we use jargon we don't really understand? Why don't we just do things? She's got some great short videos. Let me try in my technically inept way to actually throw up a definition for us. And
I'm
this
keep talking. I'll keep talking whilst you're trying to do that, because I thought of another point around, where you're trying to build a culture, an adult to adult based culture, because a lot of organizations are very paternalistic. Yes, they care, but it's a very adult child or parent child relationship. Radical candor has to be a foundation of a very adult to adult culture. People come to work to do a job. They don't necessarily come to work to do a bad job, but I think sometimes, people need to have the ability in order to be able to speak freely and honestly. And I think that is a foundation of an adult to adult culture.
I don't think that happens very often. And I keep going on about how old I am. It seems to be something I do all the time now, but I'm very aware that I'm in my 43rd year of working in different places. And that perspective gives me a long retrospective on, I just don't see this very often. I see a load of people almost petrified of the impact of being honest. And that's partly because they carry the legacy of never having done this ever before. Let me try and put a definition up now that I've been not multitasking, but single tasking. Are you seeing that?
Yes, yeah, we can see that.
Okay, this is Kim Scott. I mean, I'm coming at it from Kim Scott. You're coming at it more from Patty McCord. It's good. So what do you make out of this?
Radical candor really means caring personally at the same time as you challenge directly. Yeah, absolutely. I think we've talked about the fact that if it's obvious to the person that's receiving, as I said, positive or negative information, it's very much about wanting to be giving the information to that person to help them. It's around the helping them understand, realize, acknowledge that something that they may be doing may be good or bad.
Yeah, I think this is it. And I think I started to understand a while ago the difference, as suggested, between sympathy, compassion, and empathy, for instance. And radical candor is very much in the truly empathetic, truly compassionate, in a directly offering, caring way, not just, oh, you feel like that, what a shame that is for you, thank you very much, what next, who's got something else to say to me. It's about caring enough to be bothered about how people feel and what they're going to do about it. It's about offering, not just giving opinions. And I think that's what I like about this. It does balance, and that's what makes it so difficult. It does balance I think I need to say this to you with alongside genuinely, and I think it's going to be helpful to you, as opposed to, I think you're going to need to be told this, but you aren't going to like it.
Yeah, and I think it's a mindset shift around that fear of I need to tell somebody something and it's going to cause upset, to I
Mm.
need to tell somebody something because I think they're going to get it and I think they're going to be able to grow from this feedback. And also I think people definitely find that it's easier to give positive feedback in the moment, and I think that that positive feedback in the moment reinforces good behavior. And I know that sounds quite parent-child, but it does, you know, where you can, I've been in scenarios where I've been coaching one of my team members through quite a difficult or complex case, and they do something, and it shows me that they've learned something. So throughout the case, or throughout the time that I've worked with them, that there's been a definite improvement. And so in the moment, it's really important to go, you've got it. Absolutely brilliant. That is exactly what I was looking for. Can you see how you have changed and how you have developed? So that's really honest, because what I'm saying to that person is, actually, you weren't so good before, but now you've got it. So that's quite brutal, but said in a really empathetic way.
Yeah, and I also think we've got to be careful we don't go down the it's usually about what people don't want to hear route, because as you said before, it is also about positive feedback. And there's such a paucity of that. If only more people said more often, I've just seen you do something really good there. You handled that call far better than I could. People don't go around saying that. That is radical candor. It's about saying, this is how I feel about what you've just said, and I care about you enough to feel that's going to reinforce and make you feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
It's not only about cushioning the blow of telling somebody something they don't want to hear. It's also doing more of the good stuff, which we just don't see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm feeling really positive about this conversation. So it's got to have some really positivity when you're being that real positive person in the moment. I'm sure there's neuroscientific.
Well, I think I should tell you, from a caring perspective, you've really helped me with this, and you've reinforced my learning already. So I'm being radically candourish with you. Let's go into the quadrant. I don't want to go into this in huge depth because we could take too long on it. But I think it's a good thing to actually show the. And I'm really getting. Oh, look, there it is. I'm actually on top of the technology. He says.
Well done. Definitely improved since last time, Andrew.
No, I'm not, because I've just gone back to the previous one. So I see. You were too swift with your positive feedback to me there. But it's very caring of you to be so thoughtful. And I've lost it again. So as I pretend to know exactly what I'm doing, which I rarely do, and call it back. What else have I got here? I've got in the moment. I love that term. Thank you, Deborah, for giving me in the moment as a term some years ago. A lot of this is wrapped up with other stuff, isn't it? And I think it's important we understand context. A lot of this is wrapped up with something emotionally charged, something around which there's anxiety. Not always, because it's also on the positive side. That ability to, in the moment, right now, this moment, not 8 seconds moment, but least of all afterwards, why didn't I say moment? In the moment is a heck of a skill to develop.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is, and it takes guts. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat. You know, radical candour isn't something that somebody can just do. I think it needs quite a lot of practice, and I think it also takes guts to be able to step up in the moment to give that feedback, whether it's positive or negative. I think it absolutely takes a real strength of character to be able to do that, which is why I think people shy away from it so easily, because it is, you know, it's one of those things you haven't got time.
How do you think people learn this? How do you think people develop this? He says, as he once again tries to put up the model. So where does, I mean, is listening and watching what we're saying here enough, do you think? Or do we need to go to source? Do we need to read the books? Do we need to watch the videos by Kim Scott and Paddy McCord? Do we observe people more closely in our own behavior to reflect? Where does the ability to do this better come from, do you think?
I think more research. I think people learn quite well, you'll tell me because you're the L&D specialist. They learn from examples, and I think they need to see other people practicing it to kind of really understand the nuts and bolts of how you can act in a radically candourish way. That doesn't make any sense. How you can speak with radical candor. I really like this slide that you're showing now around the quadrants of how it can't work or how it doesn't work. And I think ruinous empathy is the one that we see a lot in workplaces where we've talked about where managers or people are really frightened to give that especially negative feedback, and so they kind of go down this, oh, that's really great, well done, when actually it wasn't, and you're not developing anybody at all. In fact, what you're doing is you're reinforcing the bad behavior that they're already, or the performance, or whatever it is that they are demonstrating. By showing that ruinous empathy, then nobody's ever going to get better. Nobody's ever going to improve.
No, I agree. And sometimes people think they're doing this, but they undo it by saying things like, well, you know me, I'm only really telling you because I have to, or I'm following procedures, or whatever. And you lose the impact of it and you lose credibility. I think you've got to be able to do this well. And I think the reason I'm showing this really is that care word again. It's about saying, don't do this, don't do that, do something else. Get into the box which says, I'm actually doing this for real. I'm doing it directly, but I'm doing it because I care. And I think the caring word is central to this. I think we all get the candour thing. We all get it's about being direct. I think we need to place it alongside the caring thing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that empathy. And, you know, I've over the years, I've been in some really, really, really sensitive, difficult situations to be in, and I learned very early on in my career, and it's not just saying it, it's meaning it as well, because I think, you know, people aren't stupid. They can tell if there's false empathy, and I think, you know, acknowledging somebody's feelings and saying, I can see this, or I also learned, when somebody is in a highly emotionally charged situation, and they are expressing themselves, they'll say things like, oh, and so did this to me, which is awful, isn't it? So radical candor isn't going, oh yeah, it must have been terrible for you, because then you're agreeing with that person. What I would say is, I can see you feel like that, so then I am acknowledging how they are feeling, but I'm not agreeing with them. I'm acknowledging that this is obviously a very sensitive and horrible situation for them to be in, and I think that's a really nice example of radical candor.
Yeah, it's something to be practiced, and it's difficult. So as we come towards the end of what is always a too short consideration of complex issues, what's the most significant takeaway you would like anybody who's had the good sense to follow all of this to go away with? What's the most important point that I think
listen to some of the YouTube videos. They're not massively long. They're not massively onerous. I mean, this book here is tiny. It's a small book. There's a number of pages, but it is small. Or audiobooks. If you enjoy audiobooks, listen to the audiobook, because I take a lot more in. And then just try it. Yeah. Even if it's in a home situation rather than a work situation, and you need to give some feedback, or you need, you know, something your partner or your children might be doing that might not be, because that's a fairly safe space there. You know,
you think so?
I think try it. I think people who use this method find it very liberating, and I think it will improve people as team players and as managers as well.
Okay, well, again, from my point of view, it's interesting, because I'm going to come out with something I wouldn't have thought about if we hadn't had this conversation, which shows the value to me of what I call learning conversations. And I've just written invite it, because we've been kind of taking the line of being proactive in the sense of doing it for others. Yesterday, I had a conversation with a client, and the last thing she said to me was, and if you get any performance feedback for me, make sure I get that. And I thought, wow, that's unusual. Maybe it's American more than anything else. And I thought inviting it is important. Inviting radical candour from people who otherwise wouldn't have given it to you.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about that now.
Yeah, and actually, I'll build on that very, very quickly, because I know we're going to run out of time.
That's all right.
I have done that in the past. I have asked for feedback, and people really struggle.
I know.
They really struggle, and it's. I'm being open, I'm being honest. I want to be able to develop myself, and I've asked for feedback when I've dealt with very tricky situations of the manager.
How did I do?
Struggle,
Or you get the fact just, oh, you did it very well, or oh, that was difficult. I could see. You don't get meaningful. And I think we're launching into part 2 now, and we said we might return to this in terms of application, which could be useful. And I'm now thinking more deeply that that's a bit worried because I don't know what the words are going to be immediately. Yeah, it's just difficult. I'm going to fall back on saying it's difficult. I'm going to close this down now because we can return to this topic, and I think we should, because there's a lot in it that we just haven't had a chance to explore. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll speak to you soon, Andrew. You take care.
Turn us off, please.